Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode with your Money Fit MD, Dr. Latifat. How are you guys today? Remember, we're here to have fun, we're here to enjoy life, we're here to chat about the important things in life and how you and I are going to create our definition of a rich life. So, if you've listened to any of my podcasts by now, you probably know that I batch record. And I honestly just need to stop talking about that and record what I mean by batching and how I batch my life to help increase my productivity, because that's something that comes up a lot for a lot of physicians. So, anyways, my point is that I release my episodes every week, but I'm not recording every week. So, anytime that I get a chance to actually record an episode with you guys, I feel so fabulous because it's literally like I imagine sitting down, hanging out with my girlfriends or boyfriend, depending on who's listening right now. And we just get to hang out with a nice cup of coffee or a nice glass of wine. And we just have a lot of fun and learn how to create the kind of rich life we all want and deserve. One thing that's been going on, depending on when you listen to this, was I lost my dad, unfortunately and sadly, last month. That was July of 2021. And it's been a difficult time in terms of processing grief, which I, ended up recording an episode about because I think it's a very interesting emotion that a lot of us don't think about, especially as physicians. We experience grief a lot, but we don't necessarily process it or handle it in a way that is healthy. And what ends up happening is that actually does impact our lives in so many different ways, including finances, relationships, and all those other stuff that is important to create a rich life. So, anyways, today I wanted to share with you guys 10 things that I have learned from my father regarding how to create a rich life. And the thing is, some of the stuff where very few of them were actually taught, some of them were observed and not necessarily understood or appreciated when I was growing up because it wasn't a class that I actively took. However, when I think back at some of the stuff as I'm processing this loss and this grief, some of the things that is shared with us throughout his life, I am amazed by how parallel his life experience and the things that he manifested in his life are with MoneyFITMD. So it's really, really interesting because we don't know where our motivations are coming from, where our inspirations are coming from. But anyway, so this episode today is going to be sharing with you some of the 10 things that I've learned from my father and that would impact your life and help you in terms of creating your definition of a rich life. So I'm calling it the 10 money or life lessons from my father. Before I get started, though, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. So my dad, Abdul Ghani Ali, unfortunately passed from this world July of 2021. That's the year we're in right now, after a brief illness. He was, and it's still a little hard to say was, so sometimes I may say is, but you get my point. He was an interesting character, is what I would say. Not a perfect man by any shape or form, but he was a very effective man. This guy grew up in a polygamous family, which meant that his dad had multiple wives, which is not unexpected, or it's something that actually is very common in that society at that time, in that religion. And my dad was, I don't even know what number he is or was in terms of his siblings, but he has a lot of siblings and I have a lot of cousins. But the important thing is that my dad was high school educated, didn't go to college or anything like that, but he realized at a young age that being a business owner was something that he wanted to do, that having business or businesses was something that he wanted to create in his life. And he went from nothing to building something amazing and remarkable for himself. But he did not stop there. For him, and also for my mom, because of course, not of course, but for those I don't know, my dad was not a single father. He is or was married to my mom. They still are married. And a lot of the things I would learn was from both of them, but I'm going to say my dad primarily in this case because that's who I'm dedicating this episode to. But of course, whenever you have one person that's foremost or being the face, there is a village behind him. So major kudos to my mom. I need to record another episode for the things that I learned from my mom about how to create a rich life. And I'll talk to you guys about that on another episode. But with my dad, he has 7 kids with my mom, 6 girls and a boy. And one thing was that he realized that it was so important and valuable for women to be educated. So even though he only got to his high school education, he impacted and enforced in us the fact that we needed to get our master's level of education at the very minimum. So most of us have our master's level. Of course, I'm a physician, I have my doctorate level in that regard. But the point was that he knew that in order for women to have a seat at the table, that education was something that had to be instilled in us. So for him, I mean, I'm so grateful for my education, for my MD degree that was not negotiable in terms of whether I needed to get a master's level or beyond education or not. I give him a lot of kudos for that. And so as I talk about this episode, I am 100% dedicating this episode to my father, a man that is one of my secret sauces in life, and the person that I give a lot of kudos for the badass that I am evolving and continuing to be in this life. So here are the 10 things that I learned from him. And yes, I'm having a lot of fun with this episode. So the first one was this: buy assets. Buy assets. So assets is anything that adds money to your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money away from their pocket. And if you're familiar with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my dad didn't read that book at all. Actually, my dad does read. He picked up reading, but it wasn't like, I think he had a lot of embarrassment about not being the most proficient reading. So you don't see him reading in public, but he does read. But he talked about buying assets. That's how he lived a lot of his life. So I'll give you an example. If someone was going to buy a property and they told my dad they were buying a property that was their primary home and they were building something elaborate, my dad would literally go, what are you thinking? How many properties do you have? You need to make sure that that property you're buying is going to generate income for you. So for us growing up, we lived in an apartment because it was a 6 apartment building that my dad built. And we had 4 tenants in them because those were generating. So for a lot of my people that I talk to, a lot of my clients, I always talk to you guys about the fact that we as physicians talk about buying the physician home, the dream home, and all that stuff. But the bottom line is, if you're buying liabilities, if your money is not buying things that puts money into your pocket, that actually can hurt you in the long term. There definitely is time to buy liabilities, and I'm not anti-liabilities. My primary home is a liability. However, it's best for you to buy that when you've bought other assets. So the number one thing is buy assets first. Buy things that put money into your pocket before you buy things that take money out of your pocket. And according to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which now as I'm recording this episode, I'm like, my dad was the original Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The bottom line is buy assets first, right? So that's number one. Number two is have dreams. A lot of times I think we're afraid to have dreams. And part of it is because we're afraid of what would happen if we don't achieve those dreams. But one of the worst things in life is not having dreams at all. And when you have dreams, it doesn't mean that you have to know the how. It doesn't mean that you have to know how exactly it's going to come into play or how exactly it's going to come into fruition. It just means that you sit down and you just explore and say, 10 years from now, where do I see myself? 15 years from now, where do I view that I want to be? And the thing is, you may not achieve every single thing that you dream of. However, if you don't have dreams at all, it's like driving a car, getting a GPS, and not putting a destination in there. How the hell are you supposed to get where you want to go to, right? So when we have dreams, the key is to not necessarily have to think we have to know the how from the get-go, but also understanding that we don't set the destination because we 100% have to meet it, or we're going to judge ourselves for not meeting, but it's to create a compass in our lives to where we want to be. So if you're listening, the question is, what are your dreams, right? Are you a physician? I don't care what you do, like, what are your dreams? The fact that you may not achieve it or your fear of not achieving it is not a reason why you should not have dreams. So again, have dreams. My dad started his business from nothing and grew it into large things, into amazing things that he has or had today. And the reason why was because he had dreams. He had dreams and he maintained focus. That was important. Number 3, I'm going to smile about. It's be too much. Yes. Be too much. Oh my goodness. So here's the deal about this guy. And think what you want about him. He didn't really care what you thought about him. He just did what he wanted to do. We always laughed about this. And it wasn't always funny. Sometimes it was actually annoying. My dad is the guy that would take the mic and make an announcement. Yes, I know. Like, so whenever we were doing a wedding or anything, we're like, Dad, can you like just chill and just like be a part of enjoying it? But no, my dad was too much. And it was unapologetic. Is that the word? Yeah, it was unapologetic about being too much. He just did what he needed to do. And what I find is, and the reason why this is important is for a lot of women and women physicians, we are so afraid of being too much. We're so afraid of being judged. We're like, well, what is someone going to say about this? If I say this, how is it going to be? How is it going to be looked upon? What are they going to say? What are they going to think? And what we end up doing is we end up shrinking. And I cannot tell you how much money I have spent on getting coached and how much time I've spent on getting coached on how to stop shrinking and telling myself that I'm too much. And then I realized when I was thinking about this episode and thinking about the things that I learned from my dad, that, oh my goodness, this guy was too much and was fine with himself being too much. It wasn't unkind about it. It took up space. That's what it was. And I'll talk about that later. But the bottom line is he was too much. And so if you are someone that's listening to this, and you're needing permission to be too much, consider this permission granted. Be too much, because a lot of times what ends up being is we think we're too much, even though we really are not. And what happens is we end up shrinking and preventing ourselves from like being everything that we can and allowing the world to enjoy the goodness of what we can offer. And I'm going to share that from my own life specifically. As a physician, you want to fit into the norm. You don't want to you don't want to be too much. You want to stand in line. You want to be average because average is good. And we know what that means. We don't get to show our unique selves in medicine. We all start to fit into a box that we're not meant to fit in. And our patients suffer because they don't identify with us. We don't speak like them. We're not like them because we're like, this is professional. This is what professional should look like, right? And also with my money coaching, that was also something. I'm like, well, what are people going to think about a doctor talking about money, right? Like, what are people going to think about me, like loving people and talking about love and kindness and all the stuff and faith and God? But it's like, be you, be too much. So anyways, if you're listening right now, yes, I'm having a lot of fun talking about my father's legacy, but be too much. That's what that is, okay? And then the number 4 is raise the bar every single time. So I would add a caveat because I want to make sure I'm being as honest and transparent as possible. This part of my dad was also what I thought was also one of the most frustrating things about him, because I'm like, don't you get the fact that I've tried so much? Don't you get the fact that I've tried so hard? It's like, well, that's still the expectation. But what I now found is that because the bar was just excellent, we just had to become people that were going to become that, right? So the goal is not to judge yourself in the process. The goal is not to beat yourself up in the process. That's not the goal. The goal is for you to realize, though, that you can do this. You can achieve this. It is not impossible for you. And I think that was the goal, because most times when we lower the bar, it's because we think where the bar is at is impossible. I will, okay, so this is gonna sound funny, but I'm gonna think about when you think about like a hurdle. One of my younger sisters is an athlete, and I used to go watch her run when she was in college. We lived together in New York when I was a resident, and it was pretty funny because all the stuff, right? Whenever we're like talking about doing stuff, whenever we're talking about jumping, whenever we're talking about all that, I mean, I see the hurt and I'm like, can someone like bring it down to my level? Because I'm about to trip, right? If I jump this, I'm going to fall flat on my face. But what my dad taught us, or what his point was no, you don't lower the bar. You become stronger, right? And when I look at everything that I've achieved when it comes to MoneyFITMD, everything that I've done in creating this podcast, in creating this platform for women physicians, in creating my money school that I've created just for women physicians that I want to be complete badass about their money, everything is about not lowering the bar, but learning to love ourselves through this process, learning to understand that we don't have to lower the bar, we don't have to judge ourselves, and we can become stronger so that the length, like the hurdle, whatever range, you get what I mean? Like, you get what I'm talking about. It doesn't become something that would be a stumbling block for us, but it's something that's like completely doable, completely achievable, something that's completely attainable. So that's what that is. So it's not lowering the bar, keeping the bar raised every single time, and recognizing that you can become someone that can definitely reach that. Okay, so that's what I have about that. And then the next one that I have for you guys is kind of the one that I made mention of, number 5. It's get stronger, get better. Get stronger, get better. Get stronger, get better. You can get better. You can get. My dad used to say, do other people that are being what you want, achieving what you want, do they have two heads? And the key is understanding that it's possible for you and using them as an example of what is possible for you. So not using them as a way to like hate yourself, but as a way to recognize and realize that it's possible. If Latifat, who knew nothing about money 5 years ago or 6 years ago, who was too ashamed to ask any questions, can have a platform where she's helping women physicians learn about money, where she's teaching women physicians in her 8-week school. If she can do this, you can do it. If she can help empower disempowered physicians become empowered badass, you can do it too, right? So the bottom line is we get better, we get stronger, and it's possible for you. If someone else can do it, you can do it as well. And then number 6 is taking up space. So I kind of mentioned earlier about being too much. This feeds into it, but it's a little bit different. So taking up space is, there is an element about the energy where you can pull back because you don't want your energy to be too much and all that. But there's also the physical act of taking actions to take too much space, like to take up space, whether it's too much or not. Who gets to define that? But when I talk about taking up space is when you have an idea. What makes you think that someone else's idea is the most valuable idea? Right? A lot of times as women physicians, when people have, they come up, they ask suggestions or solutions, sometimes we don't speak up. And then someone else comes up with that idea and there's like a round of applause saying like, oh, I thought that was nothing, right? So I want us to learn to take up space. Take up space. Take up space. Your voice is valuable. Your ideas are valuable, right? Your time, because you were created for a purpose. What you want is important. Your dreams are important. I want you to take up space, right? Because there's a level of humility that we try to take up that can sometimes hurt us, because then the world becomes devoid of our ideas, becomes devoid of what we're able to bring to the table. So I want you to take up space. And then number 7 is raise leaders. Yes, that one is so key and core, because I have 3 kids. I have 3 girls. And my goal is that we will create a better world for them than that we were born into. And if you look back into history, I want us to look at the past, look at the present, look at the future. And I want us to continue to grow a world that's better than that we were born into, that we were created into. And that will take different shapes and forms. And the goal is not for you to be the one person that's going to fix it all. But imagine if we did our little piece. I did my piece about money. You did your piece about this. You did your piece about that. We will create like this conglomerate of like amazingness that's going to become what we all want our future and the world to be, like environment, the society, health, wellness, everything, right? Science, everything. Like, think about it. We can create a better world. And the goal is we want to create a better world and we want to raise leaders. And you may be listening to this episode and going, but I don't have kids, but I don't want kids. Whatever it is. The bottom line is this: it takes a village. It takes a village. My father did not raise us by himself. My mother did not raise us by themselves. Our parents did not raise them by themselves. We had aunties, we had uncles, we had cousins, we had nosy neighbors. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, that's going to be like another conversation for another day. But the bottom line is there is so much. It takes a village, it takes a community. So, whether you have biological kids or not, the bottom line is we need to raise leaders. We need to raise kids. We need to raise a generation by building legacies to let them know that they can be anything that they want to be. Their color of their skin, right? Their gender, their identity, what the world says they are, what the world does not say they are, cannot be the ceiling of their greatness. All right, I'm going to drink water. That's so funny, right? I'm not going to edit this part out because I do minimal editing, very minimal to my podcast because, hey, it's got to be as real as it needs to be. So I'm going to drink some coffee, no water. Hey, I'm being real here. I had to, because I love this stuff. I love this episode. And when I talk about this, when I think about all of this, again, I'm hanging out with my girlfriends and we're just here chilling, talking about the 10 money such life lessons from my father. So raising leaders, super important. A lot of times we talk about the things we want to teach our kids actively, but we have to remember that who we are, the examples that we are, the examples of the life that we're creating right now becomes a louder teacher to them than anything we're ever going to say. So when it comes to like creating life, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to money, what we are teaching, are we teaching them that money is evil? Are we teaching them that it's bad to spend? Are we teaching them that it's good to hoard? Are we teaching them that they cannot build businesses? Are we teaching them that they shouldn't feel their emotions and that it's not okay for girls or boys to cry? Like, what exactly are we teaching them? I want us to like look at those because this is about raising leaders. And I mean, I'm so grateful for that lesson that I got unconsciously from my parents. And it's something that I'm hoping and intentionally and actively doing with my kids as well, because I want them to be leaders. And what is a leader? That's another conversation for another day. A leader doesn't necessarily mean you're ruling the world. It means you're ruling your world. And whether you're single, whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you have your own business, whether you are your own business, whether you work for someone, you are a leader. You are a leader. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to that episode that I did with Dr. Una about You Incorporated. You are a leader. So I want us leaders to raise leaders, raise mini badasses that will know that their voice matters, that they can change the world, and that they can be an example of what is possible. Okay. And then the next one is number 7. Is that number 7 or number 8? Number 8 is invest in education. Education is so important. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably know that, and you probably are doing that already because your MD degree costs you or someone else money, right? But what I found is that for a lot of us physicians, once we get our MD, we assume that, and we assume that's the end of investing in education. I will tell you that I have spent a lot of money on my own self-care, on becoming the kind of person that I want to be, learning how to quiet my inner critic. I've spent a lot of money in coaching. I've spent money on investing on educating myself. And the times when I've had the most growth personally and financially actually was proportional to the amount that I invested in educating myself, right? So I want us to understand that outside of our MD degree, there are also things that we need to invest in. So I invest in coaching, like I mentioned. The people that I coach invest in coaching. And the important thing is to make sure that you're getting a good return of investment on your investment. So my clients that are my one-on-one clients or in my group program, my 8 weeks money school that I teach, they invest money in it, but they 10x their investment. They get way more on what they invest in. So when you're investing in your education, it's not wasting money, right? Because if you don't invest in yourself, what are you going to invest in? So that was something that was really, really important that my father passed on to us, was investing in your education. He took classes. I mean, I told you he stopped at high school, but he took classes through the library. It was like such a grabber of education. And I honestly think that if he was to do it again, he would have been a fabulous physician, because he was a great observant, observed every single thing. Is like, did you see that car? It moved. Did you see that child? The child is like walking with a limp. Their neck is like at a weird angle that they were in. So my point is, he if he was to do it again, he would have been college educated, and probably higher than that. But whatever degree you have, whether you have your MD or MD, PhD, MPH, whatever, MBA, whatever it is you have, the bottom line is this: it's not the end of investing in your education, and it's okay to invest in your education, because I'm a firm believer that the more you invest in yourself, the more you're going to grow. And it's just important to make sure that you invest in something that's going to give you a high return on your investment. All right, so that's that. And then number 9 is investing in the next generation. Kind of goes back to raising leaders, right? Investing in the next generation. That doesn't have to be your kids. That could be sponsoring other kids through education, through teaching, through coaching, through mentorship, right? It could be through sponsoring scholarships. I cannot tell you how valuable that was for me, being a recipient of scholarships. And that's something that I definitely am actively planning on doing, is sponsoring. I mean, actually, we have done that, but not formally, informally, but investing in scholarships, investing in underserved populations, investing in improving the level of education in the kids in our community by using our own resources. And if you're part of this community of mine, you bet that you're going to increase your money, because when you have more money, then you have more money to invest in all those things that will create a better future for all of us. So it's so important for us to invest in next generations. I can tell you, I mean, I probably don't even know how many people that my dad pays for their education, because that's how valuable education was for him. And anyways, I thought that was a very important point. And then the number 10, which is not the last but not the least, and this was in no order of importance whatsoever, was pay your future self, right? One of my coaching clients calls it pay your ass first. Pay your future self, right? Pay your future self. So important, right? I want you to live a rich life now, because I don't want you to, think, okay, I'm going to suffer now for this imaginary future that I'm creating for myself. But I want you to also not live today like there's not going to be tomorrow. In fact, some people would call it living like you're going to live to 100, like making 80% of your decisions like you're going to live to your 100, and maybe making 10 to 20% like you're only going to live for the short term. There has to be a balance, right? But I want you to pay your future self first. That's what my dad did. There were times when it would, make a sale, and, kids were like, okay, hallelujah, it made a sale, and now we can spend all the money on us. Like, we can finally buy this thing we've been trying to buy for a long time. And my dad would go, well, we don't have any money left after, because he took care of that stuff. He paid for a future self first. He paid that, right? And what he does, it actually forces you to be creative about having money and creating money to spend in the short term. So pay your future self first, invest into your, retirement funds, and retirement for a reason, right? You can listen to that episode if it's not recorded yet or aired, but look for it. You'll find it somewhere. Retirement, right? That's a fallacy that we'll talk about. But I want you to save that money, to invest in stuff that's going to make you more money in like 10, 15, 20 years. That's so important, just as much as I want you to also think about the present. So pay your future self first. Pay your ass first, in the words of my client, and then you also want to make sure that you take care of yourself. So those are 10 of the money lessons and life lessons from my father that I want you to hear. I'm going to add one bonus one, and this one was something that he never acknowledged. So one of his major complaints was that people were always inviting him to stuff. It's like every man, there is something, there's a birthday, there is someone getting married, someone's funeral, someone's birth, like there's always a complaint about it. But honestly, I think he actually enjoyed it. He enjoyed it for sure. And so my last bonus point is to have fun. to have fun. And fun looks different for each person. Fun for my mom is very different from fun for my dad. My mom likes to party. My dad, not as much party, but he went to a lot of celebrations, but he would take trips with his friends during the weekends to like the village. You know, they would go hang out there, they'll spend time there. It would travel. That was a thing that was important for him. He liked moments, not in a flashy, loud way. He almost reminds me of a millionaire next door kind of phenomenon, but he enjoyed in like the subtle, quiet ways of the quality of life, the travel, the quality of the food you ate, the eating what you want, but eating what is good, by having nice presentations, like have fun. In as much as you want to pay yourself first, in as much as you want to do all the stuff that I've talked about, this super special bonus was have fun, whatever that looks to you. That may be a quiet boat ride. That may be like a quiet, taking a walk, music, enjoying like dates by yourself with your spouse, enjoying vacations with your kids, but like have fun in ways that enriches your soul. That may be loud and flashy, but that may also be quiet and quaint. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this as much as I've enjoyed recording it. I encourage you and would love it if you could share this to at least one person that you think would love to learn the tips that my father shared with us somewhere before his death, and others were like after his death, because ultimately that's part of his legacy. And also the legacy of MoneyFITMD is that we would create a rich life. We would live a life of value. We would inspire, we would build legacies, and we would create a rich life, because that, my dear, is what it's about. So thank you so much for listening. And I know that I cannot wait to chat with you in the next episode. Bye-bye.